What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? After more than 150 conversations with executives from companies like Disney, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, I've learned that sports is a common denominator. Some of our guests' athletic experiences earned them a place in their sports hall of fame, like Chick-fil-A chairman Dan Cathy. Some hung up their cleats after high school, like Delta Airlines CEO Ed Bastian, while others, like Condoleezza Rice, claim they weren't that great in their sport. But no matter their skill level, they have all told me that being a part of a team taught them leadership lessons that they still use today. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, I'm your host, Don Yeager, here to give you an all-access pass to genuine, authentic, fireside chat-like conversations with today's business icons so that you can create powerful change in your organization. This is Corporate Competitor Podcast. With me for today's episode is Steve Case. Steve is one of America's most accomplished entrepreneurs and a pioneer in making the internet part of everyday life as the co-founder of AOL. If you've ever heard the phrase, "You've got mail," you can thank Steve Case. Since 2001, when AOL acquired Time Warner in a record-setting $350 billion deal, Steve's focus has been on starting and scaling Revolution, a Washington, D.C.-based investment firm that has backed entrepreneurs in more than 200 countries and in more than 100 cities across the United States. He's the author of The Rise of the Rest: How Entrepreneurs in Surprising Places Are Building the New American Dream. And I'm excited to learn how growing up on the basketball courts in my native islands of Hawaii shaped his competitive spirit. Make sure to visit corporatecompetitorpodcast.com/notes for our downloadable worksheet. We've packed this resource with my top quotes from today's conversation and added reflection questions to next level your leadership.
Context matters a lot. It's not one size fits all. You have to have more of a customized solution based on a particular company that requires asking more questions. What makes me tick? What really drives me? What excites me? What animates me? What are things where you really can say, I want to spend the next 10, 20, 30 years of my life because I really think it's important. I think it's something that really intrigues me and I want to be part of improving.
Steve, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Don. Looking forward to it.
You're well known for a lot of things in your life, but probably top on that list is your work bringing the digital world to life for many of us. Reflecting on the early days of AOL, America Online, what was the toughest thing that you went through during that journey?
Getting people to believe in the idea of the internet. It seems crazy now because internet is so embedded in their lives. Even during the pandemic, the world was operating on the internet. When we got started with AOL in 1985, only 3% of people were online. And the conventional wisdom is it would be a niche hobbyist hacker kind of thing. It never would be a mass market mainstream kind of thing because why would people want to buy a computer and connect this modem and type messages to each other when they could just pick up the phone and call people? And it was a long, hard slog to get people to believe. And suddenly, because of things like the World Wide Web and all the personal computer manufacturers decided to build modems in, cost of communications came down, so it was more affordable. New content companies emerged to create more engaging content, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Suddenly, people said, oh, this is pretty interesting. I want to be part of it. And thankfully, AOL was a beneficiary of that. At our peak in the late 90s, about half of all the internet traffic in the United States went through AOL.
Then you decided to try to figure out how to blend new media and what you were doing with old media. A $350 billion AOL Time Warner merger turned out to be, I guess, the second largest ever merger like that that's ever been completed. What made you think that the mixture of those two brands together could be so important?
When we went public in 1992, AOL was the first internet company to go public. We raised $10 million in our IPO. The market value that day was $70 million.
Those are such funny numbers today, aren't they?
Very funny numbers. And obviously, companies don't go public at 10 million raising capital, and the valuations are multi-billion dollar valuations typically these days. But for us, it was 70 million. And then 7 years later, it went from 70 million in 92 to I think it was 160 billion in 99. It was the best performing stock of the decade. We thought that valuation was pretty high, would be hard to sustain, and we should merge our company with a larger company to create a more diversified mix of businesses. And we need a lot more content that was multimedia content, more television than just text and photos. Time Warner had both. It was the largest cable system at the time. It also was the largest media company with Warner Music and Warner Brothers Studios and CNN and HBO. And
I was at Sports Illustrated at the time.
Sports Illustrated, a great example. Some of the best magazines in the world, some of the best movies in the world, some of the best music in the world, as well as the largest cable system in the world. In many ways, it's perfect in terms of strategically ensuring a path to broadband for AOL, and frankly, a path to digital for Time Warner. As you were probably remember in Sports Illustrated, people saw the internet coming, but didn't quite know how to participate. Made sense for us, made sense for them, and as well as making financial sense. That all said, vision without execution is hallucination.
Right.
The vision of those combined companies and what it could do is really extraordinary. But unfortunately, when the companies did come together, the people didn't get together, didn't focus on the right priority, didn't have the right culture. The dot-com market had crashed, and there were a lot of challenges with integrating the cultures and different people having different views. And ultimately, the merger ended up being unsuccessful. It was a big disappointment. It's not enough to have the right idea. You also have to have the right team working together in the right way on the right set of priorities.
Right. Exactly. In the early days of AOL, you used to send out welcome emails to all new AOL members that actually had your email address, steve@aol.com, giving them a little guiding tour of what to expect. But then as you grew that, you actually ended up with as many as 30 people kind of managing that email account.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that personal touch. How important was that when you're trying to establish relationship, when you're trying to establish credibility, to feel like it was a person that someone's communicating with as opposed to a big organization?
Well, in those early days when we got started in 1985, essentially nobody was online. I felt in those early days, technology, the internet did seem scary to people. People didn't understand how it worked and were a little intimidated by it. Anything we could do to simplify it and put on a more friendly face, more engaging, welcoming face was important. A lot of that was not just subscribers or customers, but as members. They're part of a community. They weren't just customers sending us money. They were co-conspirators and trying to get the rest of the world to believe in the idea of the internet and join the internet revolution. So I felt my job was not just be CEO of the company, but the mayor of the community. And the mayors need to listen to people in their community if there's some problem with the roads or safety or what have you. In addition to trying to figure out where the company should go, I was trying to be that mayor engaging with members of our community to understand what things needed to be addressed. And that led to sending out the emails. And we went from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands to millions to tens of millions. A lot of those people clicked reply, which is why it went from something I personally was able to handle to suddenly we needed a whole team to manage that email. So it gave me a pulse of what these new members of our community, these new subscribers were thinking and saying, and that was helpful as we were trying to set the priorities for the company. Another aspect that was very important in those early days, it even ties in with a broader definition of being mayor of the community, is we needed to figure out what the rules of the road were for the internet.
I love that concept, mayor of the community. If you're trying to build something, you do need a mayor. You need somebody who's got their ear to the ground or listening and is also responding and giving people some kind of feedback. I want to talk some about Revolution, what you're doing and how incredible it is to have taken the success that you found and turning it into the opportunity to help others find success. What is the thing that excites you most about what's coming 10 or 20 years from now? What are you seeing that some of these entrepreneurs are opening your eyes to that has you most fired up?
I think it ties in with some of the things we talked about at the very beginning. When I look back at those early days of AOL, the early days of the internet, what was exciting to me was I believe the internet would level the playing field. It would give people access to information, ideas, other people, commerce, all kinds of things that would end up improving their lives and having a positive impact on society. That idea of leveling the playing field was very important. And with Rise of the Rest, it's the same idea. Now we're leveling the playing field in terms of opportunity. How do we make sure people growing up in any part of the country, if they have an idea, can start and scale there, as opposed to feel like they have to move someplace else to have a real shot at being part of the startup world, part of the innovation economy. So in some ways, over the 4 decades, I've kind of been running the same play. How do you build networks, establish partnerships, influence policy that can help level a playing field and create more opportunity for more people in more places?
The subtitle of your book is Entrepreneurship in Surprising Places. You went on a tour, you went out to meet with these entrepreneurs and sit with them and try to learn. Is there a story?
So far, with our Rise the Rest seed fund, we've invested in 200 companies in 100 different cities. In Atlanta, we backed a company called Hermeus, is building a Mach 5 engine. So you can go from Atlanta to Europe in 90 minutes. And that company spun out of Georgia Tech, which has a great engineering program in Atlanta. And 10 or 20 years ago, those graduates almost certainly would have said, they have to move to Silicon Valley if I want to start a company like Hermeus. Otherwise, I can't attract the people, I can't attract the capital, I can't get the attention, I can't get taken seriously. But they've scaled rapidly, even have a $70 million contract with the Air Force, which likes to move things quickly. And they're doing that in Atlanta. In Fayetteville, Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas, there's a company called Acre Trader. Actually, the founder was working for a hedge fund in San Francisco when he came up with the idea of Acre Trader, which essentially was building a platform to invest in farmland, democratizing access to investing in farmland. And in order that to be successful, creating that marketplace, you needed to get farmers to believe in the idea, to believe that selling a stake in their business would give them capital to expand and maybe keep the farm in the family or other particular things they wanted to do. So he decided to move from San Francisco to Northwest Arkansas to launch the company in Arkansas. And that company has been very successful as well. So those are just two examples. I could have given you 200 other examples of companies all across the country that are starting up, and most people, even in those communities, are surprised when they start scaling. That's why I wanted to write a book to tell their stories, both of the companies that are being started as well as the cities that are being reimagined.
I love it. So I grew up in Wanaloa on the main island of Oahu, not very far from where you did because nothing there is too far away. But you went to Punahou High School, and there was another person that went there, a guy by the name of Barack Obama.
Yes.
And you talked about basketball being a really fun activity. Is there a memory or a lesson from you being out there kind of competing, growing, and experiencing the Hawaiian lifestyle that still affects the way you lead today?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of things. I think basketball in particular is something I really did love. I wasn't a superstar player. I remember Barack Obama, then known as Barry, was 3 years younger than I was, but I do remember him being a better basketball player. And not surprising, also did some surfing, which, as you know, having grown up there, surfing creates a particular discipline or understanding of patience and perseverance.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to wait for the right wave. And if you just take anything that comes in, you're going to miss the good one that's coming in the next set. So you have to figure out when it's time to strike. Generally, it requires a mix of both that patience to wait, but also when you see something emerging, you know it's time to go. And looking at opportunities in the investment world, for example, at Revolution, it's trying to understand where things are going, try to lean in the future, try to understand what the next 5 or 10 years might look like, but be patient, waiting for the right opportunity. But when you see the right opportunity, the company's interesting, the entrepreneur is interesting, the team they've built is interesting, the partnerships they formed are interesting, time to strike.
We've interviewed a number of venture capital folks over the years on this podcast. And one of the things that they talk a lot about is the way that they're looking at these opportunities. And often they talk about the importance of buying the person sometimes more than the idea. How are you evaluating what you want to look at when you're seeing a potential opportunity? And what role does the person's story or the person's ability to communicate it play in the way you look at it?
The person's important, but the team around them is even more important. How they have started to build the team and how they are thinking about expanding the team is critically important. Not just hiring people they happen to know, happen to be friends, maybe they went to school with or work with, who they have a lot of trust in, but also supplementing that with people that bring different perspectives, maybe insights into that particular industry they're targeting. So it brings a diversity of thought to the team. And then making sure they recognize they have to play well as a team. As everybody knows who follows sports, that dream team in basketball in the Olympics several decades ago had the best athletes in the world, but they basically got their butt kicked because they didn't play well as a team. So you've got to get the right athletes, you've got to get the right skills, but you need to make sure they play well as a team. Venture capital is investing in people, and it's also investing in the ideas, because what you're really doing, you're not investing in a person, you're investing in that person's current idea.
That's a really big point there. Talk about the dream team. I actually wrote a book on the habits of high performing teams a number of years ago. I do a keynote presentation on it. And a real key element to that was the dream team, best athletes in the world. Yes, they won the gold medal a couple of Olympics in a row, but then they finished sixth in the world with the best players because they didn't play as a team. If you're trying to evaluate one of these teams and try to understand, are they playing well together? What would be some things that I should do as I'm trying to pull together disparate individuals as a team?
Context matters a lot. It's not one size fits all. You have to have more of a customized solution based on a particular company, what stage they're in, what challenges they're facing, what industry they're trying to really attack. But particularly the early stage, making sure you've got diverse perspectives to understand all aspects of the problem slash opportunity. And at the core, what entrepreneurs really do is they see a problem and decide to do something about it and turn that problem into an opportunity. And it requires asking more questions. Probably the most basic question is, what makes me tick? What really drives me? What excites me? What animates me? There's some people that are good at the next stage and scaling things. And then there are some people that are good at the next stage, which is more operationalizing, kind of managing. AOL, part of what drove us in that first decade, we were imagining a different world, and we were kind of swinging for the fences and thinking about how high is up. When we merged and was a much larger company, there was a mix of skill sets, and a lot of people were not really figuring out where to go. They really more focused on managing what was currently there. It shifted from imagining to managing, and both are important. And you have scale, you need the expertise to manage, but there's a different mindset in terms of worrying about what might go wrong as opposed to how do you maximize what might go right. And so part of it is understanding what drives you. Are you more in the imagining camp or the managing camp? What are things where you really can say, I want to spend the next 10, 20, 30 years of my life because I really think it's important. I think it's something that really intrigues me and I want to be part of improving.
Mm. I love that understanding where you are and what's your particular skill set. Not everybody's self aware enough to know I can take it to this lid, but I can't take it to that lid. When you're encountering entrepreneurs, many of them can imagine themselves running this thing all the way to $1 billion. And the truth is they can't, right? That's not where their skill set goes. How do you coach them?
Well, I'll never say that because one of our venture capitalists told me that 35, 40 years ago. And it really ticked me off. He basically said that the history with entrepreneurs is they get it to, I think it was about 100 million of revenue, and then they have to turn it over to like a real executive or, bring in a CEO with proven experience. And I said, wow, I don't like that idea. So I decided I was going to try to get beyond that $100 million mark.
Just to prove them wrong?
Just to prove them wrong. Yeah, exactly. We're all motivated by different things. And sometimes you want to win. Sometimes you're proving something to somebody else. And the way I did it is I realized he was mostly correct, because what he really was saying, at least what I was hearing, was the skill set that got you from 0 to 100 is not the skill set that's going to get you from 100 to whatever the next level is.
So it's not insulting. He's not insulting you. He just is.
Well, the way he said it, he insulted me, but I'm trying to spin it in a more positive way here, which is, okay, well, let's unpack that. In order to scale, though, I need to think differently about my role. And in the early days as a founder, you're kind of involved in everything. You're involved in the product, you're involved in the technology, you're involved in the hiring, you're involved in the partnerships, you're involved in raising money, telling your story, et cetera. And that as you scale and have a bigger company and a bigger team, you have to be much more thoughtful about which things you really do delegate to other people, which things that you do spend time on. And so my mindset shifted from those early days where I said, I need to be involved in everything, to later I said, if in a perfect world, I wouldn't have to do anything. If I'm really a great CEO, I'll have hired a great team. I will set a great direction and vision. We'll have a clear strategy. We'll have a clear set of priorities. Everybody will know what to do. I'll empower and trust those people to do it. And I wake up and have nothing to do. Of course, you never wake up and have nothing to do, but the mindset was fundamentally different. It was more about how do you scale by being clearer around goals, clearer around empowering people and spending a lot more time on making sure you did have the right team. You did have the skill sets you need for this next chapter. And so in the long run, it worked out okay. I think it was a little bit of a wake up call that as we got to a certain scale, I either needed to step aside and hand off the baton, or I needed to change who I was and how I worked to be able to scale with the company.
Mm. So even before I started at Sports Illustrated, I began a process of asking every person that I had the chance to interview that was a person of success that if they could name one habit that they leaned into every day that you believe gives you a little bit of a competitive advantage. Is there a habit that you believe is important in the success story of Steve Case?
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple. I think one is optimism. I tend to look at things and see what's possible as opposed to see what's not possible. It goes back to what I said before. I look at a problem, turn it into an opportunity and look at why it might be successful as opposed to why it might fail. Leaning in the future, that sense of optimism, I think, has served me well. Another habit that I do, maybe sometimes to a fault, but I'm super curious and
Mm.
I'm always reading everything. I'm a sponge for information, and sometimes on topics I don't necessarily understand. I'm not even sure why I'm interested in, but I just find that by learning more things and learning bits and pieces about what's different technology might make possible, what changes might happen in different industries, what even some policy regulatory changes might happen, that over time those sort of come together, converge, and identifies interesting opportunities.
How could that be to a fault?
Well, because I probably spend too much time, doing that. My wife would certainly say I do that too much. Some of the team here at Revolution probably say that as well. Super curious, and look at a lot of websites, subscribe to a lot of newsletters, still read a lot of magazines, newspapers. A very active consumer of information, and as I said, rather disparate information as opposed to just focusing on some of the obvious things. Kind of peek around corners, lean in the future, have just a little bit of a sense of what might happen next, maybe a bit before somebody else does. And the more you read, the more you talk to people, the more you interact with people, the more you listen, the more you learn, that tends to create opportunity.
I love it. I can imagine you are getting that blessing to get the chance to see the future through some of the work that you're doing at Revolution, but you're also some of what you're learning is helping shape that as well.
Absolutely.
Steve, I have to thank you. You've given us an incredible gift, just a lot of your wisdom and your experience. And the next time I hear the words, "You've got mail," I'll think of you.
Well, thank you, Don. Appreciate it. Really enjoyed the conversation. Hope it's helpful to people.
Wow. What an incredible entrepreneur story he is. My three great takeaways. Number one, I was fascinated by vision without execution is hallucination from Einstein. It's important not just to have a good idea if you want to be successful, but you have to have the right people to help you execute it. But then it's not even just the right idea and the right people. Sometimes it has to be the right time for those things to come to life. Obviously, in that AOL Time Warner merger, it might have been the right time when the conversations began. It wasn't when the internet stocks continued to fall and it shattered both organizations. So it's not just about having great vision. You've got to be able to execute on it. My second takeaway was when he was talking about the importance of asking better questions as he was trying to establish what was the role that the leader of some of these companies he's investing in today. When he was asking the entrepreneurs, what drives you? What excites you? What makes you tick in a general sense? And asking that bigger question, are you in the imagining or the managing camp? You need both as you continue to scale and grow. But it's important that you have some awareness of where you are so that you can serve the greater good of the organization. And then lastly, I'm going to go back to something he said about those early days at AOL when he put his name and email address on the end of every welcome email to a new, he called them members. He looked at himself as mayor of the community. He wanted these members to feel like they were part of a community, that they were actually co-conspirators in the internet revolution, he said. And he recognized that as mayor of the community, he needed to listen to them to understand what they were working through and how he could make things better. What a great lesson in leadership for all of us that if we want to try to take on and maybe lead our own revolution, lead our own effort to solve something and create something special, We need to really make sure we continue to listen and be mayor of our community. Fantastic interview. I learned so much, and I am a better corporate competitor today. I hope you are as well. I appreciate you. Before we sign off, is there someone you would love to learn from as a guest on this show? Send me a LinkedIn message with your guest suggestion. It is even better if you're connected with them in some way. We'll do that interview, we'll learn from them, and we'll share the answers with you. Catch new episodes every Wednesday. Subscribe at corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to be the first to get a chance to listen. And as a thank you gift, I will send you a chapter from one of my best-selling books. Stay connected with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. My handle is @DonYaeger, DonYaeger. And until next week, I appreciate you.